One thing I've been very fortunate enough to source with the help of a good friend of mine is a set of disc brakes and basically the front suspension off a 72 midget. So disc brakes, the A-arms are drilled and reinforced for sway bars on both of them, and they were pretty much complete. So one thing I have discovered is the tie rod ends from the stock Bugeye do not fit the steering arm on the 72 midget. So that's this part here. This is the steering arm that came on my car, and comparing it, it is actually a little bit shorter. Now I'm going to take this one off right away, and then I'll compare them side by side on the bench. I've been told that they could work, but I'm a little concerned about clearance here between the tie rod end and the disc and the backing plate. So let's get this one off. I've already bent back the locking tabs, so I'll just get the impact out and get those two bolts removed. Here's the steering arm removed, and I've noted that the bolts are in the wrong spots. Just slide that out of there. You'll note that one is shorter, one is longer. The longer bolt should go in this hole and the shorter one through that, so they end up being the same. Let's put that in there. So there's the shorter bolt in and the longer bolt, and then you can see that the ends are pretty much even now. Anyway, I'll correct that when I put everything back together. So I'm just going to take these over to the bench, and then we can do a side-by-side comparison. This is the original Bugeye steering arm. This is the one that came on the 72. Even though this one's a little shorter, I am going to see if it'll work. The concern with using the original Bugeye steering arm is it brings the tie rod end too close to the disc and the backing plate. So just to see if that is the case, I'm going to bolt this up, put that tie rod in, and then see what happens. This is the original Bugeye steering arm bolted up to the steering knuckle. And here's the original tie rod end. So we'll put it in there. And I discovered that it does in fact clear, but not by very much. Now there is one other thing that I've noticed between the two, so let's get back over to the bench and have a look at that. Now although the arm actually does fit and the tie rod clears, you'll see that there's a difference in angle here between the original Bugeye and the one that came on the donor car. So that puts the tie rod at a little different angle than it probably should be. So in order to address those issues, and after a bit of research on the AHEXP forum, and I'll put a link to that in the description below, I sourced a pair of steering arms that will serve the purpose. And these are the BTA 648, and the one for the other side is a BTA 649. And I found these used at Sprite Mania. So I'm just going to do a side-by-side comparison between the donor car one and this replacement one. So there you can see them lined up with the bolts through the mounting holes. The center line of the holes line up. The angle is the same. The only difference is that the hole in the replacement steering arm is bigger and will accept the Bugeye's tie rod end. Alright, so here's the replacement steering arm in place. Let's put the tie rod end in and see what we have for clearance here. And you can see there's a little bit more, and it's a slightly different angle. Thanks to those that helped out on the forum to lead me to these and to a source for them. This is what's going to be going on the car. One thing I will be doing on the replacement steering arms is painting them As you can see on the original ones off the Bugeye, there are some remnants of yellow paint on both of those. So just to keep with that, I'll paint the new ones yellow as well. Well, here's another shot of the brake setup that I received. You'll notice on this one here, there's a backing plate or a dust shield. But on this one here, there isn't one. Now that I have the steering arm sorted out, I need to install the dust shield or backing plate onto the spindle. Now in order to do that, I need to remove the disc and the hub here. So that's what we're going to do next. And in order to do that, I need to pop the dust cover off. And then there's a big nut in there with a cotter pin, and that'll slide up. So let's get to work on that. So there we have the hub off the spindle, and that means now I can get the backing plate installed. But one thing I noticed on the back side, you can see where there's a lot of grease has been splaying out. So I think what I'm going to do is replace the seal in here, and while I'm at that, I'll clean out the bearings, make sure everything is good to go with fresh grease. And based on this one, I'll do the same on the other side as well. I just picked up new seals for the hub, and there's just one that goes on the inside, so that would run against this part of the axle here. In order to make this a little easier to work with, I'm just going to undo these 4 bolts and separate the rotor from the hub. It just makes it a little easier to work with. I'll remove both bearings. It's a little one on this end, and the bigger one on this side, and along with the seal. I'll clean everything up, clean the bearings, repack them with grease, and put everything back together. So here's the hub all cleaned up. I used my parts cleaner and then just shot it with some brake cleaner afterwards. And let that all dry up. And here's the new seal, and then the cleaned up inner and outer bearings and the spacer. And you can see I've just cleaned that up. So next step is to get some grease into these bearings, and then I can get them inside the hub and put that all back together. So before I can put this all back together, I need to pack these bearings with some grease. And what I usually use is this Lucas extra heavy duty wheel bearing grease. So I don't have a tool or a gadget to put that grease in. So I'm going to show you a way to do it without any gadgets or tools. So how I load up the bearings with grease is Just want to make sure that that's all. First of all, you want to make sure your bearings are clean and spinning freely, as this one is. And then I just get a dollop of grease, put it on my hand, and then work that grease into the bearing. And you can see it's actually coming through. If you look, you can see it actually squeezing through on the other side. That way I know that that race is full. So I'll just keep going around a couple of times just to make sure. And I think we're good to go on that one. Scrape the excess back into the can. Now, one thing to keep in mind on the bearings is there's a right way and a wrong way for these to go in. You'll notice it looks a little different on one side than the other, and you can see in small letters right in the side of the outer race the word thrust. The face of the bearing that says thrust goes on the inside closest to the spacer, and that's the same for both the inner and outer races. You can see there where it says thrust, so that goes in to the hub that way. So with the bearing oriented correctly in the hub, I used a large socket that's the same as the outer diameter of that bearing. So you want to put any force that you use should go onto the outer race of the bearing, not the inner, or it'll pop out. So we'll flip this over. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the inside and a bit on the outside of this spacer. Now the narrow end of the spacer goes to the outer end of the hub. Something like that. And that'll get centered in properly when when everything gets clamped up. And now we'll just repeat the process with the outer or the inner bearing. Dollop of grease. Now remember that where it says thrust on here, it's probably hard to read in this shot, but where it says thrust there, that goes inside in the middle. Now I don't have a socket big enough for that, but quite often I will save other bearing races. That one's too big. Yeah, this one might work. So this is a bearing race from an old set of bearings, and that way I can use that. It's approximately the same size. Then I can just use that and just tap around. Let's try it up the other way. So I guess the idea is don't throw away all your old bearing races because they can come in handy, and I just have a couple of different sizes hung up there. So there's a couple of them there. I got a smaller one. Right, so next up is the seal, and it's got a flat face on one side and almost a dish or whatever you want to call that on the other side, and this is the side that faces into the joint. So this is what you'll see on the end of the hub. So there's a bit of grease inside the hole there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a piece of small piece of wood to act on that to make sure I get it in as square as possible. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. This is just a piece of 1x4. Put that on there. So there we have the cleaned and repacked bearings installed, spacers in, and the new seal is installed in the end here, nice and flush all the way around. So next up, I'll grab the rotor, bolt that back on. There we have the rotor cleaned up a bit and rebolted to the hub. Next, we'll get that installed on the steering knuckle. And I've just got the pieces here. So there's the washer and the nut and the grease cap. And the only thing missing from this little assortment here is a cotter pin. And I always use a new cotter pin when I'm putting this stuff back together. So there we have the new backing plate on the hub assembly for the left-hand side of the car, along with the repacked bearings and new seals, and then repacked bearings and new seals on the setup for the right-hand side of the car. So that's all I have time for this episode. Next time, I'll be working on the rebuilding the brake calipers, putting the new shoes in, which I have here, and also I'm going to put together the steering rack. If you've enjoyed the video, please share it with your friends. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget the little bell icon so you'll get notified when the next videos come out. So my name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.